The massive ship floated silently in the darkness of space. Its shell gleamed with a blue-green light that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. Inside the command center of this ship, Admiral Krell watched the stars through a window that stretched. From floor to ceiling, Krell belonged to the Zarlaxian race. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with skin that shimmered between gray and purple. His 4 eyes could see things that most beings could not: heat patterns, energy flows, and even the faint traces left by ships that had passed by days earlier. Another day, another sector to bring under control, Krell said to no one in particular. His voice had a musical quality that all Zarlaxians shared. For 10,000 years, the Zarlaxian Empire had ruled the known galaxy. Their ships were the fastest, their weapons the strongest, and their minds the most advanced. A smaller Zarlaxian approached Krell and bowed deeply. "Admiral, we have detected signs of technology in Sector 8734. The energy readings suggest a developing civilization." Krell nodded slowly. This was routine work for the Empire. They would find new species, show their power, and add another world to their collection. Sometimes the new species would fight back, but they always lost in the end. The Zarlaxians were simply too advanced, too powerful. "Prepare a scout team," Krell ordered. "Let's see what primitive creatures we found this time." Far away, on a blue planet called Earth, a woman named Susan Wright sat in a control room filled with screens and beeping machines. She wore the blue uniform of NASA with a small American flag patch on her shoulder. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her eyes were fixed on a screen showing unusual readings. "Alan, come look at this," she called to her. Colleague Alan Miller walked over, a coffee cup in his hand. He was tall with short, dark hair and a serious face. "What did you find?" Susan pointed to the screen. "These signals from deep space, they're not natural. Something is moving toward our solar system, and it's moving with purpose." Alan put down his coffee and leaned closer to the screen. "How far away?" "Based on these readings, they'll reach the outer edge of our system in about 2 weeks. Alan's face grew more serious. "We need to alert Space Command immediately. This could be the first contact situation we've been preparing for." Within hours, the news had spread through the highest levels of Earth's governments. Emergency meetings were called, and defense systems were put on alert across the planet. Humanity had long wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they were about to get their answer. On the space station orbiting Earth, Captain Gwen Hayes received her orders. Her station would be the first line of defense if the approaching ships showed hostile intent. Gwen was a veteran of space operations, with 15 years of service. She had never expected to be the one facing humanity's first alien encounter. "All personnel to stations," she announced over the station's communication system. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Earth's space defenses were not as extensive as they might have wished, but they were not helpless either. Decades of satellite development, space exploration, and military planning had created a network of defensive systems that surrounded the planet. Back on the Zarlaxian scout ship, Commander Vexlor reviewed the data coming in about the solar system they were approaching. "Interesting," he said, studying the holographic display. "The third planet shows significant energy usage. They have satellites in orbit and even some primitive space stations." His science officer nodded. "They're more advanced than we expected for this region. Still, their technology appears to be only a few centuries old. Nothing that would challenge us." Vexilor smiled, showing rows of small, sharp teeth. "Prepare the standard greeting message. Tell them who their new rulers are and what we expect of them." As the Zarlaxian ships entered the solar system, they passed Neptune and its moons. Earth's long-range sensors detected them immediately, tracking their unusually fast movement. Susan and Alan watched from NASA control as the alien ships approached. "They're not even trying to hide," Alan said. "Either they don't know we can see them, or they don't care." In space stations and military bases around Earth, people prepared for whatever would come next. Some prayed, some made peace with their possible end, while others focused entirely on their duties. Humanity had fought many wars in its history, but never one against beings from another world. 5 days after they were first detected, the Zarlaxian scout ships reached Earth's orbit. They were beautiful in a strange way, sleek vessels that seemed to flow rather than fly through space. There were 7 of them, arranged in a formation that clearly showed their military nature. Captain Hayes watched them from the window of her station. "Open communications on all frequencies," she ordered. "Let's see if they want to talk." Before Earth could send a message, the Zarlaxians broadcast their own. It appeared on screens across the planet, translated almost instantly by Earth's AI systems. The face that appeared was alien yet recognizable as a living being. 4 eyes, no visible nose, and skin that shifted colors as it spoke. "People of this world," the message began. "You are now in the presence of the Zarlaxian Empire, rulers of 1,000 star systems and masters of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Your planet is now under our protection and control. Disable your weapons, surrender your resources, and prepare to serve the Empire. Resistance is not advised." Yardiak message ended abruptly, leaving humans across the planet in stunned silence. After a moment, Captain Hayes found her voice. "Send our response," she said to her communications officer. "Tell them we welcome peaceful contact with other civilizations, but Earth is a free world. We do not surrender to demands." When Commander Vexler received the human response, he could hardly believe it. In all his years serving the Empire, he had never encountered a young species that dared to refuse their first command. "They must not understand who we are," he told his crew. "Show them a small demonstration of our power. Target one of their uninhabited moons." The lead Zarlaxian ship turned toward Earth's moon. A beam of intense green light shot from its front section, striking the lunar surface. A crater 3 miles wide appeared instantly where the beam hit. "Send the message again," Vexler ordered. "Perhaps now they will understand." On Earth, military leaders watched the display of power with growing concern. The alien weapon was beyond anything humans had developed. But instead of creating fear, the attack hardened humanity's resolve. "All ships, defensive positions," ordered Captain Hayes. "If they want to fight, we'll show them humans don't surrender easily." The battle for Earth was about to begin, and the Zarlaxians were about to learn that they had seriously underestimated this species they had just discovered. The first shots of the battle came from the Zarlaxian ships. Beams of green light cut through space toward Earth's defense satellites. 3 satellites exploded instantly, becoming nothing more than bits of metal floating in space. Captain Gwen Hayes watched from her station as the attack began. Her hands gripped the edge of the control panel so tightly her knuckles turned white. "All ships, engage according to Defense Plan Alpha," she ordered. Her voice was steady despite the fear she felt inside. "Let's show these aliens what humans can do." Earth's defense fleet was small compared to the Zarlaxian ships, but what humans lacked in size, they made up for in creativity. The plan they had prepared for this moment wasn't about matching the aliens' firepower. It was about using what advantages they had. 20 smaller Earth ships shot out from behind the moon where they had been hiding. They moved in patterns that confused the Zarlaxian targeting systems, zigzagging, spinning, and changing speed randomly. The Zarlaxians, used to enemies that fought in organized formations, struggled to lock onto the unpredictable human vessels. Commander Vexler frowned as he watched the battle unfold. "What are they doing? This is not proper combat technique." His weapons officer looked equally confused. "They're flying like they're broken, sir. Our targeting systems can't predict their movements." While the small ships distracted the Zarlaxians, Earth's larger vessels moved into position. They had been equipped with special weapons designed specifically for this moment. Electromagnetic pulse generators that could disable electronic systems without destroying them. On the main Earth defense vessel, engineer Frank Collins monitored the pulse generators as they charged. "EMP at 80%, he reported. "Ready to fire in 30 seconds. The ship's captain, Ben Ward, nodded. "Get us closer. We only get one shot at this." The Earth defense vessel slipped behind one of the smaller human ships, using it as cover, to approach the Zarlaxian fleet. When they were in range, Captain Ward gave the order. "Fire EMP." A wave of invisible energy spread out from the Earth ship. When it hit the closest Zarlaxian vessel, the alien ship's lights flickered and then went dark. Its weapons stopped firing and it began to drift aimlessly. On board the disabled Zarlaxian ship, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow. Commander Vexilor looked around in shock as his control panels went blank. "What happened?" he demanded. "Get our systems back online immediately." His crew worked frantically, but nothing responded. The humans had done something the Zarlaxians had never encountered. They had attacked the ship's systems rather than trying to destroy the vessels themselves. Back on Earth, people watched the battle through live feeds from space. In the NASA control room, Susan Wright and Alan Miller cheered as the first alien ship went dark. "It worked," Susan exclaimed. "The EMP worked." Alan nodded, his expression serious. "One down, 6 to go, and now they'll be ready for it." He was right. The remaining Zarlaxian ships quickly adjusted their shields to block the electromagnetic pulse. But humans had more tricks ready. Earth's scientists had been preparing for this possibility for years, developing multiple approaches for fighting technologically superior enemies. Captain Hayes directed the next phase from her space station. "Launch the drone swarms," she ordered. Thousands of tiny drones, each no bigger than a coffee cup, shot out from Earth's defense platforms. They moved, in perfect coordination, like flocks of birds creating a cloud around the Zarlaxian ships. Each drone carried a small explosive charge, not enough to damage the alien vessel significantly, but enough to confuse their sensors. The drones began to detonate one after another, creating a chaotic pattern of explosions all around the Zarlaxian fleet. Their sensors couldn't distinguish between real threats and the drone explosions, making it impossible for them to target Earth's ships effectively. Admiral Krell watched the battle from his flagship at the edge of the solar system. He had expected a quick victory, a simple show of force to bring another primitive world under Zarlaxian control. Instead, he was watching his scout fleet struggle against tactics they had never encountered before. "This is unusual," he said, as another Zarlaxian ship lost power. "These humans fight unlike any species we have encountered." His second in command, a veteran of hundreds of conquest missions, looked troubled. "Should we send reinforcements, Admiral?" Krell considered the question. The Empire had never failed to conquer a world on first contact. To send reinforcements would be admitting that these humans posed a real challenge, something unthinkable for a species that had ruled unchallenged for millennia. "No," he decided finally. "Let Commander Vexilor handle this. It is merely taking longer than expected." But Vexilor was rapidly losing control of the situation. 3 of his 7 ships were now disabled, drifting helplessly in space. Another had taken heavy damage from a coordinated missile attack that had somehow slipped through their defenses. "Retreat," he finally ordered, swallowing his pride. "We must return to the fleet and report what we have learned." The remaining Zarlaxian ships turned away from Earth and accelerated to escape velocity. As they fled, Earth's defense forces cheered. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Zarlaxian Empire had failed to conquer a world on first contact. On her space station, Captain Hayes allowed herself a small smile. "Stand down from combat alert," she told her crew, "but stay vigilant. They'll be back." In the days that followed, Earth prepared for the return of the aliens. Scientists studied the disabled Zarlaxian ships that had been captured, learning everything they could about the enemy's technology. Military leaders from around the world met to plan a unified defense strategy. And ordinary people dealt with the new reality that humans were not alone in the universe, and that their first encounter with alien life had been hostile. At NASA, Susan and Alan worked tirelessly with a team analyzing the alien technology. "Their systems are incredibly advanced," Susan said, examining a piece of Zarlaxian equipment. "But they're also consistent, like they haven't changed their basic design in centuries." Alan nodded. "That could be an advantage for us. They might not adapt well to new situations." In his flagship, Admiral Krell received Vexilor's report with a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. How could a young species with primitive technology have defeated Zarlaxian warships? It was unthinkable. "We will return to this Earth," he declared to his officers, "with the full might of the Empire. These humans will learn their place in the galaxy." But as he spoke, a small doubt crept into his mind. These humans had already shown they could do the unexpected. What else might they be capable of? The first battle was over. Earth had won an important victory. But the war for humanity's freedom in the galaxy had only just begun. 2 weeks after the first battle, Earth was buzzing with activity. Scientists worked day and night studying the alien technology from the captured ships. Military leaders trained new space pilots, and engineers built more weapons based on what they had learned. In a large laboratory under a mountain in Colorado, Susan Wright carefully took apart a Zarlaxian communication device. She wore special gloves to protect her hands as she worked. "Look at this, Alan," she said, pointing to a small crystal in the center of the device. "It seems to be the power source, but it's unlike anything we've ever made. It's storing an incredible amount of energy." Alan Miller leaned closer to examine the crystal. "If we could figure out how to make these, we could power our whole planet for years with just a few of them." Susan nodded. "And that's just one small piece of their technology. Their materials, their computer systems, their engines, they're all centuries ahead of ours." But as the Earth scientists learned more about the Zarlaxian technology, they noticed something interesting. The aliens' devices were extremely advanced, but they all followed the same basic designs. It was as if they had found a perfect way to build things and then never changed it. Their tech is like a tree that grew very tall, but never branched out. Alan explained during a meeting with military leaders. They refined the same ideas over and over, but they didn't explore new directions. General Peter Russo, the head of Earth's defense forces, considered this information. "Can we use that against them?" Susan nodded. "Maybe. They seem to struggle with adapting to new situations. They expect enemies to fight in certain ways, and when we didn't follow their rules, it confused them." General Russo smiled for the first time in days. "Then we'll keep breaking their rules." Meanwhile, in deep space, Admiral Krell prepared his fleet for the return to Earth. He had gathered 200 warships, a force that had conquered entire star systems without difficulty. "We will show these humans the true power of the Empire," he told his officers. "Their resistance was impressive for such a young species, but it ends now." His science officer, Threll, approached with a report. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of the human species based on the data we collected." Krell glanced at the report. "Tell me what you found." Threll seemed uncomfortable. "They are unusual, Admiral. Their biology is simple enough, carbon-based life forms with relatively short lifespans. But their history is unlike any species we've encountered." "How so?" "Most species develop in predictable patterns. Their technology advances steadily, their societies become more stable, and conflicts decrease over time." Threll displayed a chart showing the typical development pattern. But humans, he showed a second chart with a wild zigzagging line. "Their development is chaotic. They've nearly destroyed themselves multiple times with their own weapons. Their societies constantly change form, and yet somehow they've advanced more quickly than almost any species we've studied." Krell studied the charts with growing concern. "What does this mean for our conquest?" Threll hesitated. "It means they're unpredictable. What took our species thousands of years to develop, they achieved in mere centuries, and they seem to thrive in situations of conflict and challenge." Krell dismissed these concerns with a wave of his hand. "No matter how unusual they are, they cannot stand against the full might of the Empire. Prepare the fleet for departure." Earth preparation continued. Every nation contributed to the defense effort. Old enemies put aside their differences to work together against the new threat from space. In a manufacturing facility in Detroit, workers built new space fighters designed to be even more maneuverable than before. In laboratories across the Io planet, scientists developed weapons specifically targeting the weaknesses they had found in Zarlaxian technology. Captain Gwen Hayes was now promoted to admiral and put in charge of Earth's growing space fleet. She visited a training center where new pilots practiced in simulators based on the first battle. "Remember," she told the pilots, "the Zarlaxians expect us to fight according to rules they understand. Our advantage is that we don't play by their rule book. We make our own." One of the pilots, a young woman named Laura Kelly, asked, "But their ships are so much more advanced than ours. How can we possibly win?" Admiral Hayes smiled. "Because technology isn't everything. Creativity, adaptability, the willingness to try new approaches, these are human strengths. And based on what we've seen, the Zarlaxians have forgotten how to adapt. They've been the strongest for so long, they don't know how to handle a real challenge." In Washington, D.C., world leaders met to discuss the situation. President Sam Rivera addressed the gathering. "We face the greatest threat in human history," he said. "But we also face our greatest opportunity. If we succeed in defending Earth, we will not only save our planet, we will open the door to the stars. The technology we're learning from the alien ships could transform our world and take humanity to heights we've only dreamed of." The Earth's space defense system grew stronger every day. New satellites with improved weapons replaced those destroyed in the first battle. The moon became home to several military bases providing a forward defense position, and then one day the long-range sensors detected movement. The Zarlaxian fleet was approaching. Hundreds of ships, far more than in the first encounter. In Iu, the NASA control room, Susan and Alan watched the readings with grim faces. "They're really coming back with everything they have," Susan said softly. Alan nodded. "But this time we're ready for them." Admiral Hayes called a meeting of all fleet commanders. On screens around the world, military leaders gathered to hear the final defense plan. "The enemy will arrive in 3 days," she announced. "They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender when we see their numbers. Let's show them that humans don't give up that easily." Scientists Liz Parker and John Rogers presented their findings about the Zarlaxian neural interfaces, the systems that connected the aliens to their ships. "Their neural interfaces give them advantages in controlling their vessels," Liz explained. "But they also create a vulnerability. They're sensitive to specific electromagnetic frequencies that could disrupt their connection." John added, "We've developed devices that can broadcast these disruptive frequencies. They won't permanently harm the Zarlaxians, but they will temporarily break their connection to their ship systems." The plan took shape. Earth would not try to match the Zarlaxians in direct combat. Instead, they would use targeted attacks to disable the enemy ships, focusing on the newly discovered weakness in their neural systems. As the Earth forces prepared for battle, Admiral Krell's fleet entered the outer reaches of the solar system. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the image of Earth on his view screen. "Soon," he said, "that world will be just another part of the Empire, and these humans will learn their place in the galaxy." But deep inside, a feeling he had rarely experienced began to grow. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Krell felt a trace of doubt. The day of the battle arrived. The sky above Earth was filled with more stars than usual. But these new lights were not stars. They were Zarlaxian warships, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight as they approached. From his flagship, Admiral Krell surveyed the human defenses. Their small fleet looked pitiful compared to his armada of 200 ships. Their weapons were primitive, their shields weak. By all logic, this should be an easy victory. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show no mercy." The Zarlaxian fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Each ship knew its place. Each weapon had its target. They had used the same battle strategies for thousands of years, perfecting them to the point where resistance was typically brief and futile. On Earth's main defense station, Admiral Gwen Hayes watched the approaching enemy with steady eyes. "They're using a standard attack formation," she noted, "just as we expected." Her second-in-command, Commander Ryan Ellis, nodded. "They don't think they need to change their tactics for us." Admiral Hayes allowed herself a small smile. "That's their first mistake. Initiate Defense Plan Delta." Unlike the orderly formation of the Zarlaxians, Earth's ships moved in what looked like chaos. Some raced directly toward the enemy, while others retreated to hiding spots behind the moon and near asteroids. Still others formed small groups that darted in seemingly random patterns. In the NASA Control Center, Susan Wright and Alan Miller monitored the neural disruption devices they had created. These devices, now installed on Earth's fastest ships, were their secret weapon. "Disruption ships are in position," Susan reported. "Ready on your command." General Peter Russo, who was coordinating the ground defense, gave the order. "Activate disruption devices." The small, fast Earth ships closest to the Zarlaxian fleet suddenly released a burst of energy. This energy was invisible, but spread quickly, through space. When it reached the Zarlaxian ships, it didn't damage their hulls or weapons. It attacked something more fundamental. On board the Zarlaxian vessels, crew members suddenly lost their mental connection to their ships. The neural interfaces that allowed them to control complex systems with their thoughts went silent. For beings who had relied on this technology for millennia, it was like suddenly going blind. "What is happening?" Krell demanded, as his own ship's systems flickered. Around him, his crew struggled with manual controls they rarely used. "Some kind of interference, Admiral," his science officer reported. "It's disrupting our neural links. We're having to switch to manual systems." Krell growled in frustration. Manual controls were slow and clumsy compared to their usual methods. It was like trying to write while wearing thick gloves. How did they know to target our neural systems? While the Zarlaxians struggled to adjust, Earth's forces launched their attack. Missiles streaked toward the enemy ships, targeting their weapons and engines rather than trying to destroy them completely. "Remember the plan," Admiral Hayes reminded her pilots. "We don't need to destroy their fleet. We just need to disable enough ships to make them retreat." The human strategy worked better than they had dared hope. Without their neural interfaces, the Zarlaxian ships couldn't coordinate their defenses. Their perfect formation broke apart as each captain struggled to protect their own vessel. Earth pilot Laura Kelly led a squadron of fighters in a daring attack on one of the largest Zarlaxian ships. Her fighters darted around the massive vessel, firing precisely at its engine ports. "Keep moving," she ordered her team. "Don't give them time to lock on to us." The human pilots flew in ways that seemed insane to the Zarlaxians, spinning, reversing, direction suddenly, even shutting down engines to drift briefly before restarting with a burst of speed. It was flying born from centuries of aerial combat against equally creative human opponents. Admiral Krell watched in disbelief as his carefully planned attack fell apart. 20 of his ships were already disabled, their engines dead. Dozens more were damaged and struggling to maintain position. "This is impossible," he muttered. "They are just humans, primitive beings who only recently learned to leave their own planet." For the first time in his long career, Krell faced a decision he had never expected to make. "Signal the fleet," he ordered finally. "Pull back to defensive positions. We need to regroup." On Earth, people watched the battle through live feeds and cheered as the Zarlaxian fleet began to retreat. But military leaders knew this was just a temporary victory. "They'll be back," General Russo said. "And next time they'll be prepared for our tricks." Admiral Hayes nodded. "Then we'll need new tricks." After the battle, scientists Daniel Wilson and Nancy Garcia examined data from the neural disruption devices. The results were promising, but concerning. "The good news is that our devices worked perfectly," Daniel explained during the debriefing. "The bad news is that the effect only lasts about 20 minutes before their systems adapt," Nancy added. "And now that they know about this weakness, they'll develop countermeasures. We won't be able to use the same approach next time." President Rivera considered this information. "So we need a new strategy before they return." "I might have an idea," Susan said, stepping forward. She and Alan had been studying the communication systems from the captured ships. The Zarlaxians use a form of telepathic communication enhanced by their technology. It's faster than our methods, but also more vulnerable to certain types of interference. Alan continued her thought. "We think we can create a device that doesn't just disrupt their neural links to their ships, but also interferes with their communication with each other. It would create confusion within their fleet." General Russo looked interested. "How long would it take to develop this?" "A few weeks," Susan estimated. but we'll need help from every major research lab on Earth. President Rivera didn't hesitate. You'll have it. Whatever resources you need. Meanwhile, in deep space, Admiral Krell faced the anger of the Zarlaxian High Command. His face remained calm as he reported the defeat, but inside he felt something new. Fear. You have failed twice against these humans, the High Commander said, his voice cold. This is unprecedented in the history of the Empire. Krell bowed, his head. These humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They fight in chaotic patterns. They target unexpected weaknesses. They adapt their strategies constantly. Excuses, the High Commander dismissed. You will return to Earth with an even larger force. You will crush these humans completely. Failure is not acceptable, Admiral. As the communication ended, Krell stared out at the stars. The Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds, dominated the galaxy for 10 millennia. But something told him these humans were different. For the first time, he wondered if the Empire had finally met its match. On Earth, preparation for the next battle continued day and night. But despite the danger, there was a new feeling spreading among humans: hope. They had faced an advanced alien empire and survived. They had proven that humanity could stand against the stars, and in secret laboratories around the world, scientists worked on not just defensive weapons, but something more ambitious: engines that could take humans beyond their solar system. The Zarlaxian technology was showing them the way to the stars. The next battle would determine not just Earth's fate, but humanity's future among the stars. 3 months passed as both sides prepared for the final battle. Earth worked day and night building new ships and weapons. The Zarlaxians gathered their forces from across the galaxy, creating the largest fleet in their long history. Admiral Krell stood on the bridge of his new flagship, a massive vessel 3 times larger than his previous ship. Around him, 500 warships waited for his command. This time he would not fail. This time humanity would fall. The humans have surprised us twice, he told his officers, but now we know their tricks. We have adapted our neural interfaces to resist their disruption. We have changed our communication systems to avoid interference. We have studied their chaotic fighting style and created new targeting systems. His officers nodded in agreement. The Empire had existed for 10,000 years because it learned from its rare setbacks. The humans had won 2 battles, but they would lose the war. Begin the approach, Krell ordered. Let us end this resistance once and for all. On Earth, Admiral Gwen Hayes received the news from the long-range sensors. The Zarlaxian fleet was coming, and it was far larger than before. 500 ships, she reported to the world leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. More than twice what they sent last time. President Rivera looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Can we stop them? Admiral Hayes didn't sugarcoat the truth. Not in a direct battle, no. Their fleet is too large, their technology too advanced. But we're not planning to fight them directly. She nodded to Susan Wright, who stood and activated a holographic display. This is our plan, Susan explained. We call it Operation Last Resort. The plan was audacious. Instead of defending Earth, the human fleet would attack the Zarlaxian flagship directly. A small team would board the vessel and capture Admiral Krell himself. Their society is extremely hierarchical, Alan Miller explained. Everything flows from the top down. If we can capture their admiral, we might be able to force a ceasefire. The risks were enormous. Earth would sacrifice much of its defense fleet as a distraction. If the boarding team failed, Earth would be left vulnerable. But they had no better options. We have one advantage they don't expect, Admiral Hayes said. Humans are willing to sacrifice for each other. The Zarlaxians, from what we've learned, put self-preservation above all else. They can't imagine someone would risk certain death to save others. As the Zarlaxian fleet entered the solar system, Earth launched its defense. But instead of spreading out to protect the planet, most of Earth's ships formed a spear-like formation aimed directly at the center of the enemy fleet. From his flagship, Admiral Krell watched this with surprise. What are they doing? This is suicide. His tactical officer studied the human formation. They appear to be targeting your ship specifically, Admiral. Krell laughed. Let them try. This vessel could destroy their entire fleet alone. The human ships charged forward, taking heavy losses as they broke through the outer layers of the Zarlaxian fleet. Ship after ship exploded, but the formation held, pushing ever closer to Krell's flagship. On the lead human vessel, Admiral Hayes watched grimly as her fleet was decimated. Hold course, she ordered. Get us as close as possible. When they were finally in range, the center of the human formation broke apart, revealing a small, fast ship that had been hidden inside. This vessel, piloted by Laura Kelly, shot toward the Zarlaxian flagship at incredible speed. What is that? Krell demanded as the small ship approached. His weapons officers tried to lock onto it, but it moved too erratically, before the Zarlaxians could stop it. The small ship crashed directly into the side of the flagship, not a suicidal ramming attack as the aliens expected, but a controlled crash landing that breached the outer hull. From the crashed ship emerged the boarding team, Admiral Hayes herself, along with Susan, Alan, and a small group of soldiers equipped with weapons designed specifically to work against Zarlaxian technology. Find the bridge, Hayes ordered. Move quickly. The human team fought their way through the massive ship facing fierce resistance. Susan used a device that disrupted the Zarlaxians' neural systems at close range, temporarily paralyzing them, without causing permanent harm. Admiral Krell received reports of the boarding party with growing alarm. These humans had penetrated the heart of his fleet and were now inside his own ship. It was unthinkable. Seal the bridge, he ordered. Prepare to self-destruct if necessary. The humans must not capture this vessel. But he had underestimated human determination once again. Admiral Hayes and her team reached the sealed bridge doors. Alan activated a device they had built using Zarlaxian technology, overriding the door controls. When the doors slid open, Admiral Krell found himself facing Admiral Hayes. Human soldiers quickly subdued the bridge crew, leaving only Krell standing. You have lost, Admiral, Hayes said simply. Krell stood tall, his 4 eyes glaring at the human. Kill me then. I will not surrender. Hayes shook her head. We haven't come to kill you. We've come to talk. This was something Krell had not expected. In the Empire's long history, enemies were either conquered or destroyed. The concept of negotiation with an inferior species was alien to him. What could we possibly have to discuss? He asked. Hayes gestured to Susan, who activated a communication system that broadcast their words to both fleets. For 10,000 years, the Zarlaxian Empire has ruled through force, Hayes said. You've conquered 1,000 worlds and believed your way was the only way. But Earth has shown you another possibility. We've fought you to a standstill not because we're stronger, but because we're different. We adapt. We create. We work together in ways your empire has forgotten. Susan stepped forward. We've studied your technology. It's remarkable, but it hasn't truly advanced in centuries. You've refined the same designs, but you've stopped innovating. Humans never stop looking for new solutions. Krell wanted to deny these words, but he knew they contained truth. The Empire had grown complacent in its long rule. What do you propose? He asked finally. Peace, Hayes said simply. An alliance between Earth and the Zarlaxian Empire. We can learn from each other, your experience and advanced technology combined, with our creativity and adaptability. Together, we could achieve things neither of us could alone. The idea was revolutionary. Never in its long history had the Empire treated another species as an equal. But Krell was intelligent enough to see the wisdom in Hayes' words. The High Command will resist this idea, he warned. Hayes smiled. Then we'll have to convince them, won't we? In the years that followed, the alliance between Earth and the Zarlaxian Empire transformed the galaxy. Human innovation breathed new life into Zarlaxian technology. The Empire's rigid hierarchy began to relax as they adopted some of humanity's more flexible approaches. Earth gained access to the stars, with human ships traveling to distant worlds. And other species inspired by Earth's example began to negotiate their own agreements with the Empire. Admiral Krell, who had come to Earth as a conqueror, became the first Zarlaxian ambassador to humanity. Working with Admiral Hayes, he helped build a new relationship between their peoples. They believed they ruled the galaxy, Krell would later write in his memoirs, until they discovered humans, and in doing so, discovered a better way forward for us all.